everybody. Welcome. My name is Laura Roberts. I'm a senior director at JFF. I see some familiar faces in the room who I know JFF, but for those that don't, we are a national nonprofit that works across the education and workforce spaces, and our goal is around quality jobs. And so we intersect with all the folks here and represented here to drive towards that goal. This room, for folks who are in here for the first time, is all around employer action and how we can support employer practice change in a skills-first movement. So all day yesterday, that's the topic in here, all day today. And if you see friends at Walmart Foundation and Sherm Foundation, thank them, because this is the first time we've been able to do that at ASU+GSV. So we're really excited. And today, right now, we're going to be talking about how HR tech can help advance the skills-first movement. And before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about what skills-first is and means. If you were here just an hour ago, you heard our friends from Burning Glass talk about how we've actually got a lot of data now around how many employers are removing degree requirements, which is part of the skills-first paradigm, right? Moving from traditional degrees and competencies to a more open skills landscape and assessment. The other thing that our friends from Burning Glass mentioned is that employers aren't necessarily hiring more people without degrees as a result of that. The tech piece is not the only reason why that is true, but it's a part of it, right? And so I'm joined today by 5 wonderful folks who tackle that in different ways. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about what it looks like to approach the integration of technology, the interactions between technology in a way that helps HR leaders take more meaningful steps towards changing that data. So actually hiring people and advancing folks with skills and based on skills versus traditional degrees. All right, so we're gonna skip the formal, lengthy introductions for sake of time, and we're gonna get right into it. And so my first question for folks is, can you all say a little bit about why should we even be talking about tech and the integration of tech and tech tools and the tech stack when we think about shifting the skills-first paradigm forward? And I'm actually going to start down here with Richard. And if you want to give a quick intro, you're welcome to as well.
No worries. Richard Baird, a little-known retailer called Walmart. So yeah, for me, the technology stack needs to be, it's very important that it's interoperability between, and it's not only, between internally within Walmart, but also, our stakeholders and even our competitors. How do we share and exchange information and trust that information that's being shared?
Hi, I'm Scott. I'm the CEO and founder of Hireguide. We're a decision management platform, specifically operationalizing skills-based hiring in recruitment. I spent 7 years building and launching hiring technology at LinkedIn, including LinkedIn's applicant tracking system. So my co-founder also built the skills infrastructure at LinkedIn. So we've been thinking about this for a long time. The reason that we should be talking about this, not to overstate it, but can today's HR tech stack meet tomorrow's skills-based movement? Absolutely not. The current version of the HR tech stack is woefully underprepared to do this. I think specifically about skills-based hiring, you mentioned that removing the degree requirement didn't actually drive those decisions. That doesn't seem surprising at all to me because now we're no longer filtering those folks, but it's ultimately the hiring managers who are doing the interviewing and assessment, and they are not enabled by applicant tracking systems in any way to be able to adopt these kinds of methodologies. So I believe there's a whole technology category and rethinking that needs to go along with the movement, and I'm really glad that we're talking about it today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Fernando Rodriguez-Villa. I'm a CEO of a company called AdeptID. We are matching software that tries to address skills gaps and match people predictively. A huge part of our approach, right, is that we do everything API first. So there's no kind of front-end AdeptID thing to log into. We, in fact, plug into the back end of other systems, including some folks on this stage. And part of why we've adopted that strategy is that we think that there's a whole kind of ecosystem of tools that our organizations have been using that have a kind of embedded like pre-skills first thinking in the way that they look at and regard talent. And there is a new generation of tools, right? Scott's kind of leading one of them, that all have a kind of familiar set of challenges for actually turning skills-based thinking into data, into kind of action and recommendations. And then that sits kind of beneath the surface of a lot of what folks are up to. And so that's this kind of notion of a tech stack, right? A kind of, for folks like there are kind of multiple levels to that. A lot of the change needs to be much subtler and kind of much lower down in the stack in order for kind of some of the real changes to take place.
Great. I'm Kelly Palmer, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Southern New Hampshire University, previously at Degreed, and previously the CLO at LinkedIn. So I'm kind of seeing all angles of this. But right now at Southern New Hampshire, you know, we've got 250,000 online students, and all of them are right now pursuing degrees, and we know that the skills first of all, we know that, you know, technology could help us really bridge the gap between what people are trying to do in university, the skills they're trying to obtain, and how we translate that into opportunities in the workforce. That's one thing. But the second thing is we're also looking at ways to help people not only understand the skills that they're building when they get degrees, but also, you know, how can we help them all, get skills certifications that are non-credit, non-degrees in addition to that, so that they don't take so long. So that's kind of how we're looking at it, and technology just plays a huge part in every area, you know, that we're working on. So I'll leave it at that.
There's never much left to say after following Kelly, is the honest truth. But David Blake, and I'll tell a very quick, humanize it a little bit, a story. True story, Marlin Steele, a 39-employee manufacturing company in Florida, manufacturing low-intelligence steel wire baskets. So like you go to Einstein Bagels, and the bagels are sitting in a basket. That's what they made. And they went on a skills transformation using a skills matrix. They put the name of all 39 employees on one axis. They did 135 micro skills on the other axis. And every employee got it rated 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 on each of the 135 micro skills. This was on a corkboard, and it was a printout of an Excel spreadsheet on a corkboard on the manufacturing floor. And as each employee was able to upskill from a 0 to a 1 to a 2, in each micro skill, they would get a micro raise. So they would get 7 cents more per hour in their hourly wage. And fast forward, it was this radical transformation. The company transformed from being low intelligence steel manufacturing to medium intelligence. They were making components for weapons systems by the time they were done. The employees went from making minimum wage to many of them making over 6 figures, buying homes, paying off debt, sending kids to college. And it was all based on this micro upskilling. But that happened about 12 years ago, and I've never found a better upskilling transformation story since. And the reason I think there is this particular moment we're in, which is you could do that with 39 employees. That's 26,000 skill combinations, by the way. It was manageable at 39 employees. But what if you have 200,000 employees? It just wasn't technically feasible. And why this moment matters is this democratization of AI moment essentially marks the moment where it is now possible. That transformation, that approach to work, we can now do at scale. And so that's the shift we're seeing is organizations that are willing to go on that transformation. It is the better way. Higher wages, higher productivity, more mobilization, it's the better way. And that's kind of the future we're on the doorstep of.
Yeah, it's a really helpful example, and I think a good segue too into kind of a double-barreled question. I'm going to direct at you, Richard, because we're talking about large employers and being in a place as a system and set of stakeholders that work on skills first, where we're able to serve that market in addition to the 39 employee market, right? You mentioned, David, in that example, a couple important things. One is how that skill, sort of skill process that company went to contributed to more quality jobs. And I don't know this for sure, but I would guess maybe more equitable distribution of jobs within the company, perhaps. We know that skills first in general promotes more equitable outcomes across a number of dimensions, right? So Richard, as we think about being on the doorstep of being able to serve large companies like Walmart with a lot of the tech tools that are available, how have you all thought about that? What wins have you seen? And in particular, how do you see it kind of helping Walmart improve job quality and equitable opportunities within the business?
Yeah, so Walmart's been on this journey for quite a while now, so we're one of the leaders, and that's why we sponsor a lot of these things, as well as the non-profits, to really push the boundaries. Where we've seen internally is, like to the point made below, is we can do it in pockets of population. So if we take like an example of our associate to driver program, okay, so we know, and this is not just with Walmart, but the labor market in its whole, like truck drivers are hard to get. Okay, our population was close to aging out in the next 5 years in terms of retirement age. What do we need to do? So we need to identify people, not just from skills, but more on their motivations, traits, and interests, who would be interested in doing that job, because it's a difficult job. So we can coach and skill them, and we can build a program around it, but we need to identify across our population who we want to do, because it's a great paying job. We've got people now in, 6-figure jobs. So that's internally, we can do that in pockets. Now, how we do it in mass is difficult. Like I was just on a phone call this morning with the team, and we're talking about skills and skills definitions. So let's just say approximately 30,000 skills out there with definitions. That same skill is different per occupation. So you could be, data, analyst skills, but that's described differently for like a retail manager versus like a computing science. So I just run the numbers. You just go, okay, approximately 3,500 jobs within Walmart, 30,000 skills. That's a big number. Then you start getting into, do we need proficiency levels across those jobs? Multiply that number up again. It gets to a very large number. And then you start going, okay, how are we going to assess these things? Can we build assessments that are predictable in what people's knowledge have? Okay, knowledge is one thing, but okay, behaviors is a much different thing. Are they actually practicing at the level that we expect? So when it comes to scale, and we need to make sure that that tech stack is looking holistically across all those different components. And to the very first point, tech is one thing, behaviors is different, and we're seeing that. But we're seeing how we can influence behaviors of, for example, hiring managers by building in skills-based assessments, interview guides, skills-based interview guides, so that they can actually see with the, the proficiencies, the definitions, the actual behaviors that they should be looking for in their candidates, so that then we can gather that data. And let's just take it right as it today. If you're the successful candidate you're hired in, you're going to have a gap, and as you should have a gap, because that's what people like. They like to grow and develop. But we're not taking that information into our development systems. So those skills gaps aren't getting in to give recommendations to make people better perform in the role that they're just hired for, and also prepare for the future. So we look across the entire end-to-end talent ecosystem, and that's what we've created, is like right from the very first moment. How do we make sure that that data, that information is flowing across all systems?
I'm glad you mentioned that this is the moment where AI, I mean, there's a lot of talk about AI, but as an enabling technology to be able to do this, it's really fantastic what it can do. So we've been working on Hireguide for over 2.5 years. So we were working with the previous generation of AI, and I've seen how this has evolved. But that specific problem that you mentioned, for example, of we have this role and this skill inside this role is actually different. It even gets more complex. The skill in the role is different, but also different for the type of company. You need to understand the context of the industry and other things. But now what we can do is, for example, with Hireguide, we start with the job description, and then we can write very IO-psych informed content that's very specific to the role, to the skill, and to the company to be able to shift from asking the same 10 cliched interview questions to actually being able to operationalize a principle like that. And as David, as you say, at scale, not just, that would have been an impossible exercise to do that for every single role previously, and now we can do that very quickly. So there's certainly glimmers of hope emerging in the technology space.
Yeah, I'm curious if others have examples there. I think one of the things that I've been reflecting on, this is maybe my 5th time here or something, and I know a lot of us keep coming back, right? And what we never want to see at these conferences is like the same conversation year after year. And so I'm really interested in this idea of like, why is this moment one where we have optimism of being able to accelerate this? And so Scott and Richard, you've given great examples of that, but I'm curious if others have something they want to add.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've observed, right, is, and so we have these recommendation engines, and part of that is predicting, okay, based on what we know about an individual in their context and a job in that context, what is the likelihood that the individual would be able to make that transition? We have found that that breaking down into skills is more helpful for explanation than it is for prediction. There are actually other factors like commute time, et cetera, that have more to say about whether that person is going to successfully make the transition. Where skills are invaluable is in this convincing some combination of the person and the hiring manager why that's a fit. And if the model just says something like, hey, Sarah would be a great medical coder, well, that actually doesn't do anything in the world, right? Unless Sarah understands what a medical coder is, unless the employer understands what is it about Sarah that makes her a good fit for that. And we've found that this language of skills is really helpful in that capacity. One of the things that is true this year that was less true last year, and by next year might be so in the water that we stop talking about it as much, is that it is possible to convert a lot of that kind of structured data around skills and weighting of skills, et cetera, which has kind of existed in some form for the last several years, to change it into natural language. So Sarah's prospective hiring manager can have 2 or 3 tightly written sentences about why Sarah. And those tightly written sentences can include, she is bringing from her job as a cashier at Dunkin' Donuts ability to operate point of sale software, et cetera, right? And that kind of specificity in natural language form is a really exciting thing that is possible now, and uses skills for this kind of narrative component rather than just giving people a list, which is, I think, where kind of which has been a huge barrier to adoption here.
Just thinking about like the conversation last year to this year. I mean, I think maybe what I'd call out is there's still tensions. Like when you circle a bunch of vendors that have already pre-selected into skill data and the skills movement, you're not going to sort of inherently hear the tension in it. But I think there's other panels happening at ASU+GSV that are slowing this movement down. We have, so like the MOOC moment, two kind of moments. I think MOOCs had the chance to really actually disrupt higher education, and they didn't. Not meaningfully, not of any material consequence. And because disruption theory requires that sort of you enter at non-consumption with an inferior good, it begins to get better, but it also has to be able to disrupt and have a market to go to. And essentially the MOOCs found their business model in corporate and in sort of degree programs. And so it didn't end up being all that disruptive. We have a moment right now where we really could be shifting the model, but there's other threads that are slowing it down, including, and I think, right now, I think like the corporate education benefits has done more to slow progress than anything else. The pressure on tuition was finally starting to put enough pressure that people were actually voting with their feet. We were actually going to see changes in the model. We were actually going to see changes in pricing. But instead, what happened is we found a new payer. We found corporates who are willing to pay, not because it's a good educational product or outcome, but because it retains employees for longer. And so now higher education has a new payer, corporates. And that right there did more to slow progress than anything else.
But I would argue now, I actually think if we talk about what's happening now versus what happened last year or the last 5 years, I mean, David and I have been talking about skills for, since 2018, and when it wasn't in the vocabulary, but I feel like now you can't go anywhere without talking about skills, and it's what we're grappling with is how do we approach it. And like Walmart's a great example. I mean, you can see that they just made a big announcement this year and shifting their entire budget to saying we're actually going to put a lot more effort on short-term skill-based credentials than degree programs because it benefits everyone in that case. It doesn't mean that degrees are bad or that they will go away. It's just that people are looking for an alternative too. And I feel like that's really gaining momentum. Where one of the biggest problems is that you can get companies making these statements about how they will no longer require degrees, and then to an earlier point, it's the hiring manager where the rubber really meets the road. The recruiters and the hiring managers are the ones making the decision. So I'd say now that there's so much talk about how we build skills into our entire ecosystem, I think it's just forcing people to think about it more and to look at it differently. And it's, this is huge change. It's going to take some time, but I really feel like it's getting some momentum here that it hasn't had before, and AI and technology is enabling it to actually become more of a reality than it ever was able to be before as well. But good point.
Yeah, because you called us out. So yeah, LBU, or Live Better U program, started off at $1 a day, but it came from the intent of like trying to develop people, social economic development, movement of people. It's been around a long time. We have pivoted because we've seen that, first of all, the $1 a day, it was, you have to have a bit of skin in the game. But we've seen that detracted because $1 is a lot to a lot of these folks. So we removed that. Uptake was better, but then we started to see, like, okay, as an adult learner with a lot going on in your life, family, kids, whatever to take care of, they weren't getting through the degrees as fast as they should have, and that's on average between 5 and 7 years. Imagine waiting 5 to 7 years to get that economic mobility. It's too long. So therefore, we've pivoted to more short-form, stackable credentials. It will stack up and eventually get you a degree, but why wait 7 years to get that better paying role? Let's stack them up and progress you along the way. So that's where we've pivoted in terms of, we still have some degrees because, again, legislators in some professions have degrees requirements, particularly when it comes to like sponsoring of visas and stuff like that. It gets pretty complicated. But on the whole, we've moved to stackable credentials.
That's great.
I really like this question about what's what's holding it back? Where are we creating a drag in the system? For those of you who were here yesterday, BCG was presenting some information about 70% of the challenge is actually in the behavior change that we see. So we do skills-based hiring in the context of interviewing and recruitment. And because of these conversations, talent acquisition leaders know that skills-based hiring, organizing, interviewing around skills, McKinsey found is 3 to 5 times more predictive of performance. Meta-analytic studies of 60 years of behavioral research has made it very clear that a series of practices called structured interviewing can double your decision quality. But it will take all of 5 seconds talking to a talent acquisition manager for them to just say, yeah, right, I would love to be able to implement that, but I can barely get my hiring managers to submit their notes into the applicant tracking system. Never mind sit down and actually have a very thoughtful process about this. So what we have is a desire to do something, but the applicant tracking systems, which is the primary tool that's been given to talent teams, is completely useless. Sorry for those I worked in the applicant tracking system space, so I'll defend that position. But it's almost completely useless to implement something like that. So I think where AI is interesting is not necessarily is also to be helping with that behavior change moment, but I think it is really about that inertia of the behavior change. That's what we're specifically thinking about. The best application of AI is not evaluating candidates. I think that's both unpractical and unethical, but instead using the AI to say, how can we change behavior and make behavior easier for the hiring managers to be able to implement these processes that should be happening. And so, and it works. It's very good. It's very good at that. So I think that's helpful. But there's certainly a lot of inertia on the getting over the habits of things.
I think one of the things that both AI and kind of skills first thinking, hiring, et cetera, have in common is that both of them are hows, not whats. And I think what has been confusing in the space is that it's like, oh, well, we need AI, or oh, we need to be skills first. But it kind of like falls down a little bit about like, well, what are we using AI to do, or what are we becoming skills first in the interest of? And so, there are kind of use cases that go around. Okay, is it going to help us fill roles faster? Is it going to help us fill roles from a more representative, labor pool, et cetera? I think like, we're really still missing the kind of demonstrated killer use cases of the combination of the two, and we're still talking about stories from 15 years ago. And I think that's kind of that is on us as the developers to kind of show the ROI to the folks like the Walmarts of the world and say like, no, this is what happens, because then the market kind of becomes a tailwind at our back for adopting this more.
Interestingly enough, I think AI has helped us create a use case for why skills first might be an amazing thing to do now. Because imagine, this is a skill, AI skills are things that nobody could have had before, all of this happened, yet who needs to be upskilled and reskilled in AI? Everyone. Are you going to go back to school and get a degree because you need some AI skills? Probably not. But so why isn't that one of the best use cases that we can think about why skills first it matters, and people who have AI skills will probably be better positioned than anybody else in the workforce for other opportunities. So I think that's
I think that's a really good point, right? Like, because then what? Yeah, I think this rhetorical question of like, okay, are we all supposed to go back to college now in order to learn how to use AI? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Right. And I think it's also a testament in favor of stackability and kind of trying to think about what.
Yeah, and I think stackability is good, but it doesn't have to be the only way you do things. I know this is my first time in higher ed. I've always been in Silicon Valley at tech companies, and that's the conversation that I keep hearing over and over again, is that stackability, but what if it's not stackable? What if it isn't? What if we can have short form credentials be as valuable as a degree in some cases for certain skills? Then I think there's a case for that too. It's not either or. It's like there's a lot of different things we can do to approach this if we're all thinking about what's the ultimate problem we're trying to solve, and that's to help people get better opportunities, either get better at the job that they have or get a better opportunity. So.
But that might not be what everyone's trying to do, right?
Maybe
Some people,
not.
like, if the lights are out in a pharmacy in a Walmart, then Walmart is losing money by the minute, right? And so if they can't fill that pharmacy tech role to staff that and turn the lights on, that is a kind of bottom line implication for that. And so I think, we're all very motivated by empowerment, expansion of opportunity, et cetera, but we also have to kind of leverage the profit motive of a lot of these companies to say, like, not being skills oriented is expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear too, so the how versus what point that you were making earlier, Fernando, right? What are the ways in which, and I might wrap this into like a final prompt for you all because the clock is rapidly ticking down here, but when you think about the how and how tech can support, I'm going to steal your phrase a little bit, David, like moving through some of the friction that exists in this space, whether it's employers deciding to pay for degrees or behavior change shifts that are really difficult, whether it's at the hiring manager level or beyond. What piece of advice would you give folks in the room who are either employers themselves looking to adopt a new technology, better integrate existing tech, or folks in the room who are looking to partner with employers and get through and push through some of that friction in service of this broader movement? Maybe we can do 1 to 2 pieces of advice. And why don't we start? Kelly, can we start with you, and then we'll go that way and back around?
Let's start with David.
Kelly's wise this way. She gets to retort whatever I say instead of giving me the final word on higher education's position. Yeah. One practical piece of advice. We're so used to credentials. The reigning credential is the college degree. It associates, bachelor's, master's. It collapsed down to 1, maybe 2 things. Skills, no matter what happens, no matter the approach that wins, it's going to be dozens, maybe hundreds. You have many, many skills and at different levels, and there's going to be taxonomies. This isn't going to be a world that collapses down to 1 number. And so inside your organization, 3 steps. First, you need to get the skills data on everyone. You need to then work on improving the quality of that data. And where you're making a high stakes decision, you need to assess or verify the data. But it's, I only promote people every 2 years, and the key skills in their promotion might be 3 or 4 skills. I don't need to assess all 100 of your skills every year, every quarter, every week. So think in terms of a pyramid. Low quality, high volume, low volume, high quality at the top. Think in terms of a pyramid.
Yeah, I'd say, we worked a lot on skills strategies with companies over the last several years, and I think sometimes it seems overwhelming how many skills there are, to think about. And I'd say that the companies that are most forward-thinking and are actually implementing skills strategies at their companies are trying to narrow it down to say what are the most critical skills for our company or for our organization or for this role, and focus on 3 to 5 of those at different levels. And that way you can actually make some progress. I think one of the things we slow ourselves down a lot by, I hope this doesn't upset people, but working for years on skills taxonomies are like working for years on competency models. Things change so fast but they're always outdated by the time you finish. So I think don't try to boil the ocean, try to really be targeted in how you're going to focus on skills, and I think you can then measure success, against those particular skills.
Love it. I start from the pain point or the use case and then work backwards, right? So if there are, diagnose the talent issues going on, if you have a retention issue, if you have a pipeline issue, if you have a kind of an internal advancement versus external hiring issue, okay, how could we use skills-based thinking to solve that? And then make it as collaborative as possible, crucially including the actual managers and hiring managers for that role, because it needs to be felt at the kind of where the rubber's meeting the road. but it also kind of needs to be pain point oriented, because otherwise the like, we're going to be skills first now, I think kind of breeds these processes of generating a taxonomy for a reason that no one's entirely sure of going into it. I'll stop there.
I'd probably share three quick thoughts. I mean, the first is just start and ask for the air cover to learn by doing. I think we work with big organizations that also have to get this huge mandate for a global rollout, and doesn't need to be the case. We need to be on stage together next year talking about a use case where we proved something out in one department or one piece of the business. So I think lowering the table stakes and just getting started and learning by doing is the right thing, because we don't have all the answers up front. Secondly, I would say if you're working with any technology vendors, you should really evaluate the quality of the technology with the ease of use. I'm hugely inspired by Amazon's one-click purchase. Like, the amount of complexity that needs to go in to make it that easy to be able to do that and you should challenge your technology vendors to say, look, like, teams are not going to be learning new technologies. Nobody wants to do that. How do we make this as easy as possible to implement? And the third piece is a good technology vendor won't just throw the technology over the fence to you. They will actually work thoughtfully to think about that change management, and will have a very sophisticated customer implementation program that involves a number of different human touch points, because technology in and of itself is not the answer.
Dropping that Amazon reference right in front of Richard here.
Yeah, yes, sorry.
No worries. Yeah, so 100% agree. The whole way up the line there, focus on, don't try and boil the ocean. So for us, it's like 10 skills, but then on the interview process, it's 3 critical skills plus some of the leadership cultural aspects. Where the rubber hits the road is, the P&L. We need to like showcase that this is not just for doing its sake, for the wider good. So we've chosen around about 30 critical roles, target roles, however you'd like to describe it. Basically, they have pipeline problems. So if we can demonstrate that we can fill those pipeline problems through sources that weren't existing already, that's going to get our leaders, business, going to give us the remit to go, okay, go harder, faster. So that's kind of to just start. And as a customer here of a lot of the tech, what we like to do is, like, where we do need partners with us, is to actually bring those partners together in the same room and say, hey, you guys need to make music together, go away and do that, and then come back to us with an end-to-end solution, because we're not going to cherry pick and then try to jigsaw puzzle that together. Like, it's just by nature, we need to come together as a whole.
Awesome. Thank you all. I hope that was helpful for folks in the room who are thinking about this question. I'm hearing a lot about how, right? We talk a lot about what. There's so much at this conference talking about what. So I'm really grateful to the folks on stage for kind of digging into the technical piece of what does it actually look like to use so many of the tools that are here and that we're talking about to shift something meaningful in a company. So we are about at time, so please join me in thanking these folks on stage.